The Merced class was a small design of light cruiser which entered service in the late 23rd century as a stablemate of the much better known Excelsior class. The Merced would have a comparatively short service life due to their cramped interiors, which made it difficult for the ships to accept refits and modernizations, unlike the other ships of their era. The Merced measured in at 336 meters long, was 160 meters wide, and 58 meters tall. The ship was armed with 9 twin phaser banks and 3 torpedo tubes, 1 facing aft and 2 facing forward. The ship's tubes had limited burst fire capacity of 3 torpedoes each. The class had a maximum speed of warp factor 8.7 on the new scale, which was adopted just as the Merced class was entering service with Starfleet. Crew for the ships varied from between 200 to 300 depending on mission and specific year. When the Excelsior program began in the late 2260s in its early stages, there was an initial plan to bring the ship into service in the mid-2270s at some point. Thus, work began on a series of related stablemate classes to work alongside the new ship shortly after Excelsior development began. These related designs would incorporate the new technologies pioneered in the Excelsior class, but would be designed to fill other roles in the fleet other than the flagships, which was the Excelsior's intended mission. As the Excelsior program encountered the first of numerous delays, the teams tasked with the development of these stablemate designs initially attempted to keep up with the changes made in the elder ship's development process. But, with Excelsior experiencing numerous delays even early on, these teams would be retasked and reassigned with the development of the ships which would define the 2270s, such as the Constellation, Oberth, Aquila, and other designs. Ships which would use somewhat outdated technology from the last generation, which, although somewhat outdated due to developments in the Excelsior program, was nonetheless available now and proven to work. Thus, when Excelsior was finally approved for service, completing her trials in the late 2280s, over a decade after initially intended, work on these stablemate classes had to be virtually started from scratch due to the enormity of changes made to the Excelsior during her development. Work would begin on many new classes, with a heavy cruiser, light cruiser, frigate, destroyer, and scout all began, as well as a host of support ships and fleet auxiliaries, all taking into account the technologies demonstrated by Excelsior. The light cruiser development program would be announced officially in 2291, being officially dubbed the Merced class in 2292 in honor of Admiral Terran Merced of Andor, a recently deceased hero of the 4 Years' War. Work on the prototype began the next year. This prototype would complete in early 2294 and pass trials successfully later in the year, with full production beginning after this. The Merced class would begin entering service in 2296, with significant numbers of the class being in service by the dawn of the 24th century. In total, 71 ships of the class would enter service in total, and the design would see service mostly with frontier squadrons along the Federation's borders with neighboring powers. In service, the class was initially well liked, being a major improvement over preceding light cruiser classes such as the Miranda and Belknap classes, in regards to its capability and overall crew amenities comparing very well to the older ships. The Merced was powerful, fast, well-armed, and comfortable. These initial impressions would begin to wear off, though, as Merced continued in service throughout several decades, with the class being found to be too small and cramped internally as a result of her design team wishing to make the ship somewhat affordable from a resource standpoint. The ship would be too cramped to easily allow refit and modernization, meaning that unlike even older classes such as the Miranda and the similar Excelsior, the Merced was forced to be basically stuck in an early 24th century fit throughout her life. The technologies the ship could get during her refits, and even the extent of refits being severely hampered. This was not that big an issue for the ship initially. Compared to most potential opponents the Merced was likely to face, she was still generally comparable, if not outright superior. But, as time went on, and tensions rose in the region, Starfleet found the Merced to be increasingly weak compared to foreign designs. It was for this reason that, in 2242, Starfleet would begin a program of retiring the Merced class as they became increasingly hopeless in confrontation with the mainline cruisers of contemporary navies, the class being fully phased out and in reserve by the end of the decade. Components from reserve Merced-class ships would be used to keep the fleet of Centaur and Excelsior-class vessels in service, meaning that when tensions rose in the neighborhood, first contact with the Borg Collective, and later, most alarmingly, the Dominion and its disastrous first contact, all occurring in short order during the 2360s, Starfleet was unable to reactivate many of the Merced class. In fact, the ships which could technically have been reactivated would not be called up by Starfleet during even the most intense fighting of the Dominion War, this being due to a decision to use them to provide parts to reactivate yet more Excelsior-class ships, which were generally felt to have superior combat capabilities to the rather old-fashioned at this point light cruiser Merceds. The last Merceds in a technically ready-to-reactivate state would be scrapped in 2278, just after the end of the war, as Starfleet began a plan to reconstruct the Navy with more modern classes and clean out the reserve fleet would finally begin to bear fruit. Although little remembered today, and with a surprisingly brief service life for a design introduced in the late 23rd century, the Merced class acted as a valuable and very capable ship for half a century of service, providing Starfleet with a major boost in capability alongside the other ships of her generation, and giving good service despite her limitations, which would affect her later in life and lead to her early withdrawal from service. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, be sure, as all professional YouTubers are always harping about, to like the video in the description, give it a comment, subscribe to the channel if you really liked it. I also have in the description, you can find a link to my Patreon. For like $5 a month, you can do a couple of things, though I am probably going to change around Patreon here in the next couple of days, probably Tuesday, when I have time. Nothing major, just I want to get it set up to where Patreons get videos about a day early, as just a kind of nice thank you kind of deal. And, you know, I also want to do a couple of other things. I want to be more active on Patreon, basically. So if you're looking to support the channel, that's a great way of doing it. Of course, it's through the support of Patreons that I'm able to do things like buy a microphone. So the microphone that your ears are being subjected to right now as I abused it slightly, was actually bought with money from my Patreons. So thank you very, very much to them. They are awesome and very generous, and the channel would probably be being recorded from a phone without them. So thank you to them for making the channel slightly less crap. Very much appreciated. Join them if you want to. Usually these are much more entertaining, these little last couple of minutes of conclusion, but I'm just hacking Patreon and saying there might be changes when I have time. But yeah, so feel free to check that out if you want. Yeah, I'm gonna quit this now before this just becomes a really, really long plug for something not a lot of people are gonna care about. So have a nice night, or morning, or afternoon, or wherever you are. Like, have a good rest of the day, or start of the day, or tomorrow. I don't know.